it for input-output operations. Now coming to arclog files, it will be used for the media recovery. So if any of the file is corrupted or if any of the hard disk is corrupted, in those cases, to perform the recovery from media failures, we'll be using the arclog files. So whenever we are performing any recovery, what is internally happening? Using the redo content, it will replay the actual transactions. So we also saw cloning.
Okay, yeah.
So using rman, we can duplicate one database into another database. But after once the cloning is completed, we cannot have all the changes which are happening on the source database. Those will not be replicated onto the target database. Correct or not? So once we perform the cloning, once the cloning is done, we'll open both the databases, the source and the target, and the changes which are happening on the source will not be reflected into the target one. So if there is any mechanism by which if we can perform cloning, and after that whatever the changes which are happening on the source, if they will be replicated onto the target, then it will be served as a high availability, such that if one of the database goes down, or if the whole data center in which the database resides, due to natural calamities, if the whole data center is vanished, then in those cases we can use the another database as we can productionize the another database, such that all the applications which are pointing to the source database will be pointing to the target database now, and they'll work as it is. They'll not see that there is a downtime. So to provide the high availability, we can do that. So when we combine cloning with recovery, once after completing the cloning, by using the recovery mechanism, if we can reflect all the changes which are happening on the source onto the target, then we can provide the high availability. Correct or not?
Yeah.
Because all the changes which are happening on the source will be reflected onto the target. So if source goes down, if we make the target to the available to the end users, then they can perform the operations. But to make the target available for the users, it will take some time, because we have to change the connection strings which are used by the users, and also we need to change that in the application servers, because they have to point to the new target server. So it requires some downtime. If we are manually doing the cloning and if we are manually managing the recovery process, then it requires some downtime actually to make the target server available for the end users. So to overcome from those issues also, Oracle introduced the concept of data guard. So basically in data guard you will have two databases. You can have like 32 databases altogether, one being primary and others being standby. So primary will be used by the application team and application interface, and the changes will be synced with standby, and we don't need to manually take care of syncing the changes. Oracle automatically will take care of those changes, but we as a DBA, we need to configure how those changes needs to be reflected onto the standby, how the arclog files will be shipped onto the standby, how the arclog files will be applied on the standby. We need to take care. We need to set up initially. Once we set up, everything is automated. We don't need to manually configure. We don't need to manually manage everything. Automatically Oracle will take care of everything. But if something goes wrong, in that case you have to find the root cause, what caused the issue, and then you have to rebuild the data guard, or you can copy the arclog files which are missing and we can reapply them.
Okay.
So basically we'll use cloning first to build the standby databases. So whatever the data files which are present on the primary, all will be copied onto the standby servers. And after that, the arcalogs files will be shipped from the primary to standby. So to ship the arcalog files from primary to standby, we'll make use of network. So let us see that in a pictorial representation. Say for example, this is my primary database, dev. I have a server called as dev here, and I have another server called as test. I just have RDBMS software installed on this test server. And here on this dev server, I have a database called as dev. And this is on 11.2 software. The same 11.2 is also present on the standby server, which is on test. Now, using cloning, I will build the database as dev on the test server, and I will name the database as devdr. So on the test server, I'll name this database as devdr. And say for example, this dev is present in data center Texas, and this is present in data center probably Phoenix, Arizona. Such that if any natural calamities or hurricane something happens on the in Texas, then I can make this available for the end users. So basically, data guard is used for the high availability, and this database will be served as primary because initially this will be used by the end users. And on the background, whatever the changes which are happening on the primary will be reflected onto the standby. So how the changes will be reflected from primary to standby? So basically there are two services which will take care of those shipping the arcalog files from primary to standby. So once we perform the cloning, we'll have the dev cloned onto devdr. But to reflect the changes whatever happening on the primary onto the standby, we need to ship the arcalog files. Because arcalog files will have the redo information about all the transactions which are performed. So using that redo information, we can again rebuild the entire standby database. So applying the redo log files will allow us to sync the standby with primary. So how the arcalog files will be shipped? So that will be taken care by two services. One is log transport service and the other one is log apply service. So log transport service is a service which is responsible for shipping the arcalog files from primary to standby, and log apply service is responsible to use the files which are shipped from the primary to the standby. So log apply service will make use of the files which are transferred from primary to standby, and it will apply those redo log files. So basically here we have to perform the recovery process. Like the way we do recover database, whenever we have to recover the database from any media failures, we have to recover the database. So for that, first we'll be restoring the database and then we'll be recovering the database. In a similar way, if you want to make use of the log files which are shipped from the primary to standby, and if you want to make use of those files in order to replay all the transactions, here also recovery process should be up and running. That recovery process will replay all the transactions which are being performed on the standby. So to replay all the transactions, there will be a process called as MRP process. MRP process is nothing but managed recovery process, which will take care of applying the redo log files which are shipped from the primary to standby. So these redo log files or the arcalog files will be shipped from primary to standby over the network. So whenever we have databases on two different data centers, one is in Texas and one is in Arizona, we need to make sure the network which connects both the servers are fast enough, such that we'll have minimum data loss whenever if one of the database goes down. So say for example, if you have a network which is slower and the read log files are shipped from primary to standby. Say for example at 10:30 a.m. my database which is in Texas is corrupted or something happened at 10 a.m. Now probably I have all the arclog files till 9:50. So whatever the changes which are made from 9:50 to 10 p.m. I'll not be having those changes. So we need to make sure the network which connects the primary to standby is fast enough such that all the read log files will be shipped synchronously.
Okay.
So that if something happens on the primary, there'll be a minimal data loss. Now, what is the process which will take care of shipping the arclog files from primary to standby? So this can be done either by using ARCH process, which is archiver process, or else we can also use log writer process, which is LGWR process. We can ship the arclog files from primary to standby using either arclog files or log writer. So there is a small difference between sending the arclog files using the archive process and sending the arclog files using the log writer. So we'll see what is the difference exactly. Say for example, this is my SGA, which is related to dev database, and this is my log buffer. So content from the log buffer will be flushed to the read log files whenever the user issues commit, or for every 3 seconds, or whenever the log buffer is 1/3 full. So log writer will flush the content from log buffer to read log files. And here probably I have two read log groups, each of 50 MB. And the moment log writer performs a read log switch, it will also trigger a RCH process to archive the content into the arclog files if the database is in arclog mode. So archiver process is responsible to archive the content from the read log files to arclog files. Now, if we use ARCH to ship the read log files or to ship the archive content from primary to standby, then whatever the content has been written to the archival, destination, it will ship the same files from primary to standby. So it will wait until the redo content has been archived, and then once the redo content has been archived, it will ship that arclog file from primary to standby, and this will be taken care by ARCH process. So whenever we are using ARCH process, it will wait until the content from read log file has been archived to the arclog destination. The problem with this is we may have minimum data loss. Say for example, the content has been not archived from read log file to arclog file yet. At that moment of time, if my database is corrupted, then probably I'll not have the content which is present in the read log file, because ARCH is responsible for shipping the file once it archives.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we are, if the business agreement is in such a way that probably losing 5 to 10 minutes of data is okay, then we can go for ARCH process. If the business agreement is there should be no data loss, in that case we have to go for log writer process. So if we are using log writer process, instead of ARCH process sending the files from primary to standby, log writer will take care of sending the files from primary to standby. So log writer can do that using synchronous and asynchronous features. So synchronous means whenever the log writer is writing the content from redo log buffer to redo log files, at the same time, the log writer will also send the content to the standby. If we use the synchronous, and also the primary database will wait until the content is written into the standby. So basically, if you have a standalone database, just if you have one primary database. So let us take this as an example. Have a database, and my CA listener process, and this is my end user. So whenever this user is trying to connect to the database using a dedicated server connection, then this listener process will fork a server process, dedicated server process, and this will make a connection to the SCA, and it will establish a connection between the user and the SCA. Now, if the user issues any DML statements, and if he issues commit, will you get the control back immediately or will it wait for some time?
It will wait for some time, like milliseconds. It will wait for some time.
I mean, like, what is the reason why it waits for milliseconds or something like that?
It has to write the data into data files there.
So that means whenever we issue commit, DBWR will flush the content from database buffer cache to data files.
Commit.
Yeah.
Whenever we issue the commit, that that buffer cache will fetch the. From the buffer cache, that DB writer will pick up the data, write the data into data files.
No, that is not correct. When will DBWR write the dirty buffers from buffer cache to data files?
Buffer cache, if it is filled, the data buffer cache is filled, then it will write the.
Okay. What is the other criteria whenever it writes, when it writes, other than when there is no free space left is one of the criteria, or one of the situation. What is the other situation where DBWR writes the dirty buffer from buffer cache to data files?
There is no. If the read log files are filled. Checkpoint occurs like.
Yes, but when it issues commit, will the DBWR write the dirty buffers from buffer cache to data files?
Yeah, when you issue the commit, the checkpoint will occur, right? So at that time it will write the data to.
So checkpoint occurs for every commit? Which process will trigger the CKPT? Okay. Whenever the redo log switch happens, log writer will trigger the CKPT. That CKPT in turn will trigger DBWR to write the dirty buffers from buffer cache to data files. But here, when the user issues commit, is there any reason why DBWR write the dirty buffers from buffer cache to data files? If no, why does commit will take some time? Why does will not get the control immediately back? Whenever the user issues commit, log writer needs to flush the content from log buffer to redo log files. Log writer will flush the content from redo log buffer to redo log files whenever the user issues commit, or for every 3 seconds, or whenever it is one third full. So in this case, the user issued commit. That means it has to flush the content from log buffer to the redo log files.
Okay.
This is a normal scenario. But in a data guard configuration, if we go for a synchronous mode, then one second. Yeah. In data guard configuration, if we go for a synchronous mode, then not only it will wait until the content from log buffer to the redo log files has been flushed, it will also wait until the log writer shifts the redo content from log buffer. Whatever the content is being written to the redo log files, it will also wait until that content has been shipped onto the standby. Is it clear? So
Yeah.
commit will take some more time whenever we have any data guard configuration with log writer process enabled, and that too with sync option, because it also need to wait until the content has been shipped onto the standby server. Okay, and the other option is we can go for async. Whenever we are using async, it will not wait until the redo content has been shipped onto the standby. It will just wait until the content has been written to the redo log files. Okay, this is the difference between the sync and async. Sync will wait until the content has been shipped onto the standby, and that is the reason why whenever we are using log writer sync, it will synchronously write the content, and also we need to have a high bandwidth network. If there is no high bandwidth network, then commit will take a lot of time, and the users may complain you like saying that the database performance is degraded. So whenever we are going for sync, you need to make sure we have a high bandwidth network.
Okay.
Now, when to use the ARCH process, when to use the log writer, and when to use async and sync. So basically, we have 3 types of configurations in data guard. One is maximum performance. The other one is maximum availability. And third is maximum protection. These are the 3 different types of configurations which are available with the data guard. So depending upon the type of configuration we are using, we'll decide whether we have to go for ARCH, whether we have to go for log writer, and within the log writer whether we have to go for sync or whether we have to go for async. So whenever we have the database in maximum protection mode, we have to go for log writer, and that too with sync option. That means the primary will wait until the redo content is written to the local redo log file as well as remote archive destination. Okay.
Okay.
If something happens and if the standby database is down, in that case what will happen? Yeah. So commit will never complete, right?
Yeah.
So as a result, the database will be in a hung state. So to avoid the database to be in hung state, it will shut down the primary also.
Oh, okay.
Whenever the standby is not available, it will bring down the standby. Sorry, it will bring down the primary. So that means this can be used whenever you have assurance that standby will never go down. In that case, it's better to go for maximum protection mode, because if you think that the standby server where the standby database on the server where it resides, the server is not highly reliable. In that case, going for maximum protection mode, in case it will revert your high availability situation, because even your primary goes down. As a
Okay.
DBA, your main aim will be to make database up and running 24/7. So if you don't have any reliable network, or if you don't have any reliable server where your standby database resides, then it is not trustworthy to go for maximum protection mode. If you are reliable enough that standby server will never go down, in those cases we can go for maximum protection mode. And also if we have the network high bandwidth. So probably maximum protection will be used whenever one of the standby database resides in the same data center. So say for example, this is one physical server where my dev database resides. So within the same data center in Texas only, probably I have another physical server where my standby database resides. In that case, it's better to go for maximum protection mode because I will have high bandwidth network. It is local network, right? So I'll have high bandwidth network.
Okay.
And if something goes on the primary, then I can bring the standby database. But if my primary and standby database are in the same data center, and due to some natural calamities like hurricane or Sandy, if the whole data center goes down, then I cannot bring up the standby database because both are residing on the data center, same data center.
Yeah.
So this cannot withstand the natural calamities, but this can withstand from media failures. If primary database, if something corruption occurs on the dev database, or if media failure occurs, like the hard disk, probably the hard disks are damaged, or probably they have some invalid paths. In those cases, the dev database will not be available. I can turn back the standby database as primary. Okay.
Okay.
We can also use the maximum protection mode across the data centers, but provided if we have high reliable, high bandwidth network.
Okay.
Coming to maximum availability, it works similarly. It works in similar fashion to maximum protection mode. But the difference is whenever the standby database is not responding, then it will not bring down the primary database. It will just record the information like till what moment of time the read log files have been shipped into the standby and what are the read log files are not shipped onto the standby. It will keep track of all those files, and then once the standby database is start responding, then it will ship those archive log files or read log files from the primary to standby.
Okay.
So if everything works in a proper way and if nothing happens in a usual scenario, the maximum availability works in a similar fashion to the maximum protection mode. So log writer will be sending the files while writing the content from read log buffer to read log files. It will also send the content to the standby synchronous. But if the standby database is not responding, in that case, the content from the log buffer will be written to the physical read log files and the content will be archived into the archive log files. After that, once the standby server is start responding, log writer and ARCH work together to send the files which are missing on the standby server.
Okay.
So in the real time, like 60% of the data get configurations will be with maximum availability because it will provide the minimum data loss and also it provides the high availability. Okay, any questions regarding the difference between maximum availability and maximum protection?
Okay. And
Even here, we'll go for log writer with sync option.
okay.
But it may not be synchronously writing the redo content from primary to standby if the standby is not responding. If the standby network is not responding, and if your data guard configuration is in high availability mode, automatically it will go into the async mode. It will asynchronously send the files. Once the standby server responding and once the standby server is in sync with the primary, then again logwriter sync will be in active state. And it will be sending synchronously, it will be sending the redo content from primary to standby.
Okay.
Coming to maximum performance mode, we can use ARCH or logwriter. And if you are using logwriter, we can go for async. That means primary database will not wait until the redo content is shipped onto standby. It works in a similar fashion where we have where we have no data guard configuration. Commit will just wait until the content from redo log buffer has been written to the redo log files. In the background, it will be sending the redo content from primary to standby, depending upon how we configure the data guard using either we go for ARCH or logwriter. If you go for logwriter, it will send the redo content from primary to standby. If you go for ARCH, it will wait until the content has been archived, and then it will send the archive log files from primary to standby. This will be used whenever we don't have any high bandwidth network, and also where minimum data loss is acceptable. Okay? And at any moment of time, we can convert from one mode to another mode. If we configure the data guard using maximum performance mode, and in a future, if you are thinking of going to maximum availability or maximum protection mode, yes, we can also change the mode of the data guard. We can convert from maximum performance to maximum availability, or from maximum availability to maximum protection. But you need to make sure you'll configure the process in such a way that whenever you're converting the mode from performance to availability, we'll go for logwriter and also the sync option. Okay?
Okay.
Then
మనకి స్టాండ్ బై రెస్పాండ్ అవుతుందో ఇది ఎలా తెలుస్తుందండి, అంటే ఎలా చెక్ చేస్తాం?
మనం చెక్ చేయము. యాక్చువల్గా ఇట్ విల్ బి టేకెన్ కేర్ బై లాగ్ ట్రాన్స్ఫర్ సర్వీస్. And also there is another process called as remote fetch service. So these process together try to connect to the standby server to ship the archive log files. If by any means, if both these processes are not able to connect to the standby server, it will log an error in the alert log. In the alert log, you can find that standby server is not responding, and as a result, it failed to connect to the standby server and it failed to ship the archive log files. So all those entries will be present in the standby database.
Okay.
I mean in the alert log, sorry.
Okay.
And also there is a view called as $, data guard underscore status, which will show you whether the archive log files are shipping to the standby or whether they have any problem, whether remote fetch service and log transfer service, whether they have any problems in sending the redo log files from primary to standby.
Okay.
Now, whether do we require any redo log files to be created on the standby? Any guess?
Redo log files. I mean, just we are transferring from primary to like standby. I mean, no need to create any redo log files on the server.
Okay. In that case, where this redo content will be stored? Redo content is different from the data content, right? The data file content. Redo file will have the vector representation, whereas the data file will have the actual data. So where will we store this redo content?
This redo content will transfer to, I mean, redo log files of this standby server.
But
Right?
you said we don't require any redo log files on a standby.
Sorry. Yeah.
So we
I
require
think
redo
it
log
will.
files on a standby.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The redo log files which we saw till now are online log files. If you remember, I said like there are two types of redo log files. One is online log files, and the second is standby redo log files.
Yeah.
So online log files can store the online log content. That means whatever the transactions which are being performed on the database, all that redo content will be stored in the online log files. But if we have a standby redo log file, that will be used to store only standby redo content. So even if we have any online redo log files on the standby database,
Mm-hmm.
we cannot use those files to store this redo content, because those will be used only to store the online log content. Online log content means the database which is in active state. The standby will not be in active state. It is a different type of configuration actually. So basically there are two types of control files again. One is current control file, and the second is standby control file. So whenever your database is running with standby control file, those will not generate any redo content, because the users will not be connected to the database and they'll not be doing any DML transactions.
Okay.
So those online redo log files, we cannot use them in order to store this redo content. So what we can do is like whenever we are shipping the content from log buffer, like whenever the log writer is shipping the content from primary to standby, we can store it in the archival destination itself. That means it will be stored in the form of archive log files.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
But applying the redo content will take some time, because the content needs to be archived, and then MRP process needs to take the content from the archival destination and it has to apply it onto the standby.
Okay.
In order to speed up the MRP process, what we'll do is like we'll create standby redo log files here. These standby redo log files are used to store the standby redo content.
Okay.
So whatever the content which is being shipped from the primary to standby, first it will be written to the standby redo log files. And then MRP process will take the content from the standby redo log files and it will start applying onto the standby database. And also,
Okay.
if the archival generation is in a faster, like for every 3 seconds or for every 4 seconds, it is generating, like it is performing one log switch. In that case, MRP process will be somewhat slower when compared to the log writer. So in that case, the content from the standby redo log files will be archived, and the archived content will also be used by the MRP process in order to replay all the transactions onto the standby. Okay.
Okay.
If log writers keep on sending the redo content from primary to standby, it has to store it onto the standby redo log file. So if there is no free space on the standby redo log file, it has to archive the content, and after that, this can be used for storing the content which is coming from the primary. As a result, even the archived content will be used by the MRP process in order to replay all the transactions. Clear?
Okay.
Any questions till now?
బేసిక్గా ఇప్పుడు స్టాండ్ బై రేడియో లాగ్స్ నుంచి ఆర్కైవ్ అయితే ఇందులో ఉంటుందని చెప్పారు, ఆర్కైవ్ రేడియో లాగ్ ఫైల్స్ లో
అవును.
స్టాండ్ బై లో. సో ఎంఆర్పి ప్రాసెస్ అనేది ఈ రెండింటికి యాక్సెస్ ఉండేసి ఎక్కడ డేటా అవైలబుల్ ఉంటే అక్కడ నుంచి ఫ్లష్ చేస్తుందా?
అంతే అండి. It will try to read the content of standby redo log file. If the content is not present in the standby redo log file, it will make use of archival redo log file.
Okay. ఇప్పుడు సపోజ్ ఫస్ట్ ఇక్కడ ఎంఆర్పి స్టాండ్ బై రివ్యూ లాగ్స్ రీడ్ చేసేసి డేటా ఫ్లష్ చేసింది అనుకోండి, మళ్ళీ అది తర్వాత ఆర్కేవ్ లాగ్ ఫైల్స్ వస్తుంది కదా, అది ఎలా డివైడ్ చేసుకుంటుంది?
మళ్ళీ చెప్పండి.
ఇప్పుడు ఫస్ట్ సపోజ్ రీడ్ లాగ్ ఫైల్స్ నుంచి డేటా ఫ్లష్ చేసింది, డేటా స్టాండ్ బై డేటా ఫైల్స్ లోకి,
డేటా ఫైల్స్ కా ఆర్కేలాగ్ ఫైల్స్ కా?
లైక్ డేటా ఫైల్స్ కి
మళ్ళీ రిపీట్.
ఎంఆర్పి ప్రాసెస్
ఎంఆర్పి ప్రాసెస్. ఓకే.
స్టాండ్ బై రీడ్ లాగ్స్ నుంచి డేటా ఫైల్స్ కి ఫ్లష్ చేసిన స్టాండ్ బై డేటా ఫైల్స్ కి.
ఫ్లష్ అని అనదండి, ఎందుకంటే రీడు కంటెంట్ అది, దాన్ని ఫ్లష్ చేయదు. యూజింగ్ దట్ రీడు కంటెంట్ ఇట్ విల్ రీప్లే ఆల్ ద ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్ అనండి.
అర్థం కాలేదా?
లేదు, నేను ఏమంటున్నానంటే ఫ్లష్ అన్న వర్డ్ యూజ్ చేయకండి, బికాస్ ఇట్ విల్ నాట్ జస్ట్ ఫ్లష్ ద రీడు కంటెంట్ ఫ్రమ్ రీడు లాగ్ ఫైల్స్ ద డేటా ఫైల్స్. ఇట్ విల్ రీప్లే ఆల్ ద ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్ అనండి.
ఓకే.
ఆర్ ఇట్ విల్ రికవర్ ఆల్ ద ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్ యూజింగ్ ద రీడు కంటెంట్. ఫ్లష్ అంటే ఏంటంటే సేమ్ ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ కాపీ చేయడం కదా, సో ఆ వర్డ్ వాడలేమా? యా. ఓకే అండి, ఇప్పుడు ఫ్లష్ చేసింది. ఓకే, నెక్స్ట్.
నెక్స్ట్ ఇప్పుడు ఆ డేటా సపోజ్ స్టాండ్ బై రీడ్ లాగ్స్ నుంచి తర్వాత ఎప్పుడు కొంతసేపటికి ఆర్కేవ్ లాగ్స్ ఫైల్ లోకి వస్తుంది కదా,
అవును
ఆ డేటా ఆర్కేవ్ అవుతుంది.
అవును.
అప్పుడు ఎంఆర్పి ప్రాసెస్ ఈ డేటా ఆల్రెడీ డేటా ఫైల్స్ లో ఉందని ఎలా తెలుస్తుంది?
చెక్ పాయింట్ సీక్వెన్స్ నెంబర్ ఎందుకండి?
ఓకే ఓకే.
చెక్ పాయింట్ చేంజ్ నెంబరు, సిస్టమ్ చేంజ్ నెంబరు, సీక్వెన్స్ నెంబర్ ఇవన్నీ దానికే కదా. Even the archive read log file will have the sequence number, so it can distinguish whether it is applied on the applied onto the data files or not.
Yeah, got it.
So how we'll be sending the content from redo log, like content from primary to standby? How we will be sending the redo content from primary to standby? So basically, to enable the archelog mode, what we have to do, we have to set the archelog destination, correct or not?
Yeah.
For that, we'll be using the parameter log underscore archive underscore dest underscore 1.
Yeah.
We'll set to a location on the local server. Now, if you want to send the same information onto the standby, we'll be setting another parameter called as log underscore archive underscore dest underscore 2. Using this parameter, we'll configure this parameter in such a way that the content, the redo content, will be shipped from primary to standby using a network. So that means we will configure this parameter. Log archive dest 1 will go for location option. So whenever you are using location option, it will refer to the physical local location, the local physical location. So say for example, if I'm going for slash backup, or if you're going for plus DG01, it will make use of the disk group 01, which is present in the local server. Now, if I have to send the redo content to a remote server, instead of using the local option, I'll go for service option. So I'll specify service equal to connection string name. So say for example, I have a database here, devdr, and I have the connection string corresponding to the devdr on my local TNS name server. On dev server, I have TNS names.rfile.
Okay.
And TNS names.rfile, I have a connection string name in such a way that dev underscore dr equal to address, description, something like this. So I'll be using this connection string name in the service class. So service equal to dev underscore dr. So this will be an alias name for the whole connection string. So it will be translated into the whole connection string, and using that connection string, it will try to connect to the standby server. Once the connection is established, it will start sending the redo content or the archelog content, depending upon which type of process we will use, to the standby server. And which process you want to use to ship this redo content, here itself we have to specify. In log archive dest2 parameter itself, we have to specify which process we'll be using to ship the redo content. So here we can specify either to go for log writer or to go for ARCH. And if you are going for log writer, we can specify sync or async. Okay.
Okay.
Next, within this parameter, you also have another option called as valid underscore for. Here we'll be specifying what this redo content is valid for, or what this destination is valid for. Whether this destination is good enough to store only online log files, or whether it is good enough to store the standby log files also, the content from the standby redo log files. So basically we have two types of redo log files, correct or not? One is online log files, the other one is standby log files. And the content will be archived either from standby log files and also from online log files. Now, whether the archive log destination is valid to store only online log content, or whether it is valid to store the standby redo log content also, that can be determined using valid underscore for clause.
Okay.
So in valid underscore for clause, basically you have all underscore log files, or standby log file, or online log files. Online underscore log file, all underscore log file, yeah. All underscore log files, online underscore log file, standby underscore log file. These are the values which can, which can be served as an input for valid underscore for clause. So if we go for valid underscore for equal to all underscore log files, then that arcalog destination is valid to store the standby redo content as well as online redo log content. If you specify valid underscore for equal to online log files, then that destination will only be valid for storing the online redo log content. In a similar way, if we specify standby underscore log files, it will be valid only to store the standby redo log content. Now, can you guess what value should I have to give for valid underscore for whenever I am configuring log archive -2?
Standby log files.
ఏంటండి?
Standby log files.
స్టాండ్బై అండర్స్కోర్ లాగ్ ఫైల్స్ లేదండి, ఆన్లైన్ లాగ్ ఫైల్స్ ఇవ్వాలి. ఎందుకంటే ఇట్ ఈస్ సెండింగ్ ది ఆన్లైన్ రీడూ లాగ్ కంటెంట్. ఇక్కడ ప్రైమరీ డేటాబేస్ లో ఆన్లైన్ రీడూ లాగ్ కంటెంట్ కదా.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. Primary database based now.
Yeah. So this is configuring, we are configuring this parameter on the primary database, and whatever the content we are sending from primary to standby is the online redo log content. Of course, it will be served as a standby redo content once it go into the standby server. But whenever I'm sending it to the destination 2, still on the primary server, it is a online log file. So we have to specify valid underscore for equal to online underscore log files. Okay.
Okay.
Next, what value should I have to go for valid underscore for when I'm configuring log archive -1?
All underscore log files.
Why?
Archive log files. Same online log files here also.
Yeah. Going, I mean, like, yeah, if we configure it with online log files, that is okay, but there'll be some problem because if something goes wrong, we'll make primary as standby and we'll make standby as primary.
Okay.
So in that case, my primary database will be served as a standby database, correct or not?
Yeah.
So in that case, whatever the redo content which is found in my standby redo log files needs to be archived.
Okay.
So in that case, it should also be valid for storing the standby redo content, correct or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to go for all underscore log files. I mean, configuring it with only underscore log files doesn't matter until you just treat primary as primary only. But
Okay.
once you switch from primary to standby, in that case, if it is valid underscore file equal to online log file, then the content will not be archived.
Okay.
That is the reason why we have to go for all underscore log files for log archive dash one. Okay?
Yeah.
No issue, no questions, I okay?
No questions.
Next, apart from setting up these two parameters, we have to set some more parameters. One is file underscore server, second is file underscore client, and also we have to set, one second, log underscore archive underscore config, file client log archive dash one log archive dash two. Yeah, these are the parameters which we have to set. So file underscore server and file underscore client, these parameters will be served to distinguish what is a server and what is a client. Okay, so in this case I'm configuring these parameters on my primary database. That means I'm sending the redo content from primary to standby using the service name, and that service name is corresponding to my standby database. Correct or not?
Yeah.
So can you guess what will be my file underscore server here?
Underscore server.
What is the meaning of server? The one who will serve the request is nothing but a server.
Standby server name is like file underscore server here.
Why?
We are sending the data based on the server IP, based on the second standby server, right?
Yes, we are using the service name as dev underscore dr. That
Yeah.
means we are requesting this server to respond to our request,
Yes.
and this server will be serving our request by allowing us to connect onto the standby database. So
Yes.
that is the reason why my file underscore server will, I'll set it to dev dr, and
Yeah.
file underscore client will be dev.
We're sending the data from
Yeah.
here.
So client will be dev. And
Okay.
log archive config is a parameter where we'll specify what is my primary database and what are my standby databases which are involved in the data guard configuration. So as I said, we can have as many as databases, like we can have 31 standby databases altogether. So let me show you
Okay.
how did I came up with that number. Okay. If you see here, I have 31 destinations actually. Log underscore archive underscore dest underscore 1 till 31. Okay. I have dest underscore 1, dest underscore 2, 3, so on till 31. That means I can send the arcalog files from primary to standby to 30 different standby databases or to 30 different remote locations. Correct or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the maximum number of standby databases I can have is 30. Okay.
Okay.
Actually, you can say it like that. We can send it to 31 different servers. The reason for that is the local arcalog destination we can set log archive dest, because there is also another parameter called as log underscore archive underscore dest. If we set this parameter to store the local archive, I mean like the arcalog destination, set it to the local server, and then we can use dest 1 to 31 to send the read log file from primary to standby. So the maximum number of standby databases which we can have is 31.
Okay.
In 11G. In 10G, we just have log underscore dest 1 to 10. So that means we can just have 10 standby databases.
Yeah.
I guess it is dest underscore 9. So probably we'll have only 9 standby databases in 10G.
Yeah, I think I saw that in like.
Yeah, it is still log underscore archive underscore dest underscore 9. So that is the reason why we can have 9 standby databases.
Okay.
So if we want to specify all those like the primary database name and the standard database name, we'll specify in log archive config. So in the log archive config, we'll specify the primary database name, which is dev, or else we can say that whatever the databases which are involved in our data guard configuration, we'll specify all those database names. So right now I want to just specify dev and devdr because I'll just have these two databases in my data guard configuration. Okay.
Okay.
Apart from this, we also need to make sure that we will enable the arcalog mode or the force logging mode. We are syncing the standby with primary by applying the redo content whatever we are receiving from the primary database. Now, say for example, I have created a table space with no logging option. I can create a table space with logging option and also no logging option.
Okay.
If I go for no logging option, whenever I do any DML statements, probably the redo content will not be generated for those DML statements. Correct or not?
Yeah.
So in that case, how will the change will be reflected on the standby? If the redo content is not generated for the DML statement, there is no way that we can reflect the same change on the standby database. So that is the reason why we need to make sure whether we have logging table spaces or no logging table spaces. We need to make sure for all the DML statements and for all the direct path inserts or direct path loads, the redo content will be generated. So to do that, either we have to turn on the logging for all the table spaces. For that, we'll go for alter table space name, logging, or else we can enable the force logging at the database level itself. To enable the force logging at the database level itself, alter database force log. So by using that command, we'll enable the force logging. So irrespective of whether the table space in logging mode or no logging mode, it will generate the redo content.
Okay.
So in order to check whether the force logging is enabled or not, there is a column called as force underscore logging in VDOL database, which will show you whether the force logging is enabled or not. So whenever you are trying to build the data guard, first thing you have to make sure is whether the force logging is enabled or not. If the force logging is not enabled, then your standby will not have all the changes. So in order to make sure all the changes are reflected onto the standby, you need to make sure the force logging is enabled. So the first step is we have to enable the force logging, and after that we have to set all these parameters. Log archive dash1, dash2, file server, file client on the primary database. Okay, and after that మీరు హెడ్సెట్ మీద ఉన్నారా లేకపోతే ల్యాప్టాప్ స్పీకర్ మీద ఉన్నారండి?
నేను స్పీకర్ మీద ఉన్నా.
ఓకే ఓకే, హెడ్సెట్ కనెక్ట్ చేసుకుంటారా?
యా ఒక్క నిమిషం.
Okay, so first we have to make sure the force logging is enabled, and after that we have to set all these parameters. And once we set the force logging, the redo content from the primary to standby will be sent using the log transport service, and ARCH or log writer will be sending that redo content. But how the connection will be established? So to send the redo content from primary to standby, it will establish the connection as sysuser. As sysuser, it will establish the connection and it will connect onto the standby using the service name which is provided in the log underscore archive underscore dash2. So that means sys@dev_dr. It will try to make a connection to the standby using sys@dev_dr as sysdba. Now in this case, what is the physical file which is required on the standby server? Any guess? To send the redo log files from primary to standby, it will make the connection as sysuser. Now, to make a connection as sysuser to a remote database, what is the physical file which is required? Yes, so we require the password file. So once we set all these parameters, we have to create the password file on the primary, and then we need to copy the same password file onto the standby. So why we have to copy the same password file onto the standby? So basically, whenever it is trying to send the arclog files using the network configuration, it will try to use the same password of the local database, which is the primary database. So that means the password, the sys password should be same on the primary as well as on the standby server. So we'll create the password file on the primary and we'll copy the same password file onto the standby, such that the primary and the standby will be using the same password. Okay. So we'll create the password file on the primary, we'll copy it onto the standby. Once we copy the password file on the standby, we have to create మీకు క్లోనింగ్ చూపించినప్పుడు నేను 2 మెథడ్స్ చూపించానా, యాక్టివ్ క్లోనింగ్ అండ్ ప్యాసివ్ క్లోనింగ్, ఆర్ జస్ట్ ఐ షోడ్ ఓన్లీ ద యాక్టివ్ క్లోనింగ్? Okay, so in active cloning we'll create an so on the standby, once we copy the password file, we have to create an auxiliary instance on the standby. So to create an auxiliary instance, we have to set db_name, and the other parameter is db_block size. So those are the two parameters, those are the two minimum parameters which are required in order to start up the instance. So we'll create an auxiliary instance parameter file on the standby server and we'll start the auxiliary instance. And after that, we'll connect to the primary as well as to the auxiliary instance and we'll perform the cloning. While performing the cloning, if the data file or the directory structure is different, we'll be using two parameters. What are those two parameters? Whenever we are doing cloning, if the directory structure is different, the location of the data files and redo log files is different, we have to set two parameters. What are those two parameters? Okay, what are those two convert parameters? DB file name convert and log file name convert. So whenever we are doing the cloning, in the SP file class, we'll specify those two parameters such that these two parameters will be set on the standby parameter file. And whenever we are creating any data file on the primary database, even at that moment of time, those data files will be created on the standby also. Okay, so see here. Till now, I said only the DML transactions which are being performed on the primary will generate the redo content, and those redo content will be shipped onto the standby. But for example, if I don't have any free space left on my table space, if I want to add some more space to my table space, either I can reset the table space, or either I can reset the data file, or I can add another data file. Now, if I want to add one more data file, say for example, I want to go for also database, add data file, and say for example, I want to store it in database dev users underscore 05.dbf file and size 20 gig. Now in this case, when I'm adding a data file, sorry, will this command generate any redo content? Alter table space users add data file. Will this generate any redo content? Siva? No. So no one ఎలా చెప్పారు మీరు? No one ఎలా చెప్పారు? It won't create the redo. Yes, it won't create the redo. And if you remember, I showed it to you in one of the scenario. Say for example, I place a database in begin backup mode, and after that I took the backup and I end the backup mode and I added one more data file. Now I added one more data file. Now whatever the data file I created is not present in my backup files, but somehow it is recorded in the data file that there is a data file which is present in that location. Now if we want to restore the data file, what we have to do? See here, let me show you the scenario. I'm going for hard backup using manual approach. Now I enable backup alter database begin backup. So as a result, all my data files are in begin backup mode. Now I took the backup of all the data files and then I archived the current redo log file and I also copied the archive log files. Next, I created backup control file in the same location. After that, say for example all this happened at 10 a.m. Now at 10:30 a.m. I create the data file, and at 10:40 a.m. my database is corrupted. In this case, if I want to recover my database, what should I have to do? పర్లేదు అన్మ్యూట్ చేయండి.
ఓ నా దగ్గరే ఉందా మీకు? మీ దగ్గర ఉంది అనుకుంటా.
లేదు మీ దగ్గర ఉంది. Yeah. At 10:45 my database is corrupted. So how can I restore my database?
టెన్ వరకు మొత్తం రిస్టోర్ చేస్తాం డేటాబేస్ ని.
Okay.
Plus
Restore will copy my all. I mean, like will copy all the data files.
yeah.
Okay. After that, I have to perform the recovery.
Yeah.
But will I be able to perform the recovery?
No, I mean like this data field will not add in the recovery.
Okay. The backup which we took doesn't have our data file. So that
Yeah.
means the data file will not be copied into the data file location.
Data.
But how Oracle will recognize that there was data file created at 10:30? Which file will have the information about the data file locations?
Control file.
Yeah. So using the control file, so in the control file, the data file location is present. Now I have to create the data file. Otherwise, my recovery will not be completed. So how can we create the data file, or how can we restore the data file? So we'll use a command alter database, create data file as, and we'll specify the location. So this will just create a file, a dummy file, and after that, whenever we enable the recovery or whenever we start the recovery process using alter database, recover database, it will reapply all the redo information. So that means it will get all the objects and also the YAML statements which are performed against the objects in this data file. So as a result, I can restore this data file also. Correct or not?
Yeah.
In the same way, if you go for the data guard configuration, and if I'm adding one more data file on the primary, how this change will be reflected onto the standby? Whether we have to manually create on the standby database, or whether Oracle will automatically take care of adding the data file on the standby also. Any guess?
By RMan, it will automatically create that.
That is,
you are using RMan.
that is part of the cloning. That's okay. But after that,
Okay.
once the cloning is done, once we set up everything, the redo is shipping from primary to standby. But at this moment of time, if I'm adding one more data file, whether this data file will be created automatically on the standby, or whether we have to manually create the data file on the standby. So for that, there is another parameter which we need to configure. Standby_management. So this parameter can take values either auto or manual. If we go for manual approach, we need to manually create the data files on the standby server. Whenever we are adding the data file on the primary, we also need to add the data files on the standby server. If we set this parameter to auto, Oracle will automatically add this data file. So whenever there is any structural change for the database, whenever a new data file is added into the database, it will add up entry into the control file, and at the same time it will also create the same data file on the standby server. and also it will update the standby control file which is present on the standby server. So if we use auto option, Oracle will automatically take care of adding the data file on the standby also. If you go for manual approach, we have to manually create the data file on the standby, and 99.9% in the real time will go for standby underscore management as auto.
Okay.
సో డేటా గట్ సెటప్ చేద్దాం ఫస్ట్. సో మీకు ఇంకా క్లియర్గా ఐడియా వస్తుంది. సో ఫస్ట్ స్టెప్, whenever we are trying to configure the data guard, we need to make sure the force logging is enabled. So to check whether the force logging is enabled or not, select force underscore logging from $B database. You can see the force logging is disabled, so I have to enable the force logging. Alter database, force logging. Now select force underscore logging from $B database. You can see now the force logging is enabled. Okay, this is our first step in order to configure the data guard. We need to enable the force logging, and after that I have to set file underscore server and file underscore client. So if you see here, my file underscore client and file underscore server has null values. So let me set the file underscore client and file underscore server. Alter system set file underscore client equal to, I'll make it as dev dr. Oh, sorry, my client is dev here. Alter system set file underscore server equal to dev dr. Okay. After setting the file client and file server, we have to set log archive dest1 and log archive dest2. Okay, dest underscore 1 is set to location, that is /backup/dev arcalog. So this is my arcalog destination.
Okay.
But I need to make sure it is valid for all the log files, and also I have to specify here. Yeah, let me show you how to configure this parameter. So first we'll specify the location where we want to store the arcalog files, and after that we'll specify the valid for. As I said, it should be valid for all log files, because whenever the primary is switched to the standby, then this destination will also be used to store the standby ready log files. And after that, all underscore roles. All underscore roles is nothing but, in the data guard configuration, basically you'll have two roles. One is primary and the other is standby. Okay. So as I said, in the data guard configuration, we can have maximum of 31 standby databases or 32 databases will be involved in the data guard configuration. Correct or not?
Yeah. 1 minute.
Yeah. In these 32 databases, can I make 2 or 3 databases as primary? At any moment of time, only one database can be primary.
Yeah.
So basically there are two types of roles. One is primary and the standby role, and all the time in the data guard configuration we'll have only one database as primary. Now, so whether this destination is valid for a primary database or it is also valid for the standby database.
Standby.
Yeah, so we'll just specify it as all underscore roles. Okay.
Okay.
And then you have to set the DB unique name to dev. So these are, we have to configure log archive dest1 parameter. So let me configure this parameter. Oops. Okay. Okay. We also need to set log archive dash 2. Dash 2 has null value, so we need to set the destination 2 as service is equal to devdr and valid underscore for is equal to online log files,
All.
and also valid underscore for equal to primary database. If this if you make the primary as standby, then that will become the primary. So we have to specify the valid underscore for as primary role there. So let us set the log archive dash 2 also. అసలు ఎందుకు ఇట్లా అవుతుంది? Okay. Yeah. So see here the way I set the log archive dash 2. I configure it to ship the redo log files using the service name devdr, and I'm using the log writer process. And fm, I'm not sure what is the correct meaning of this. It just says the disk input output, but I'm not sure what it actually means. Then the sync, it will synchronously transfer the redo content from primary to standby, and valid underscore for, it will be valid for online log files. And as I said, once we switch the primary to standby, the standby should be primary. So we'll specify it is valid for primary underscore role, and the DB unique name will be devdr because my database name on the standby is devdr. Correct or not? My standby database name is devdr, so I have to set the DB unique name as devdr. Okay. Once we set log archive dash 1 dash 2 file server, the other parameter which we have to set is log archive config, where we'll specify all the databases which are involved in the data guard configuration. Okay. Alter system set log archive config equal to, here we have to specify all the databases. So I'll go for dev, and the other one is devdr. Oh, c slash bracket slash log archive config.
Config.
Yeah, dg underscore config equal to,
ముందు కూడా స్పెల్లింగ్ లాగ్
Yeah. I guess I'm correct. Let's check. Single quotes and on. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So log archive config equal to dg underscore config. That is, we are using for data guard configuration, and we have to specify the databases which are involved in our data guard configuration. Okay. Now my log archive config is also set. So basically I did the first step as enable force logging, set log archive dash 1, log archive dash 2, log archive config, and the other parameter I have to set is standby management. So let us check the standby management. Okay, my standby file management is set to manual, so I have to go for auto. So let me enable the standby file management to auto. Alter system set standby underscore file underscore management equal to auto. After this, whenever the arclog is generated or whenever the read log switch happens, it will try to send the read log file from primary to standby. So basically it will try to connect to the dev.dr. Now, as we don't have the dev.dr yet, we need to make sure log archive dest state to be disabled. So basically there are states. For each and every arclog destination, there is also a parameter associated with the dest parameter. It is called as state. So that state will have the value as enabled or deferred. Enabled means Oracle should archive the content to that destination. If it is deferred, Oracle should not, Oracle doesn't need to worry about archiving the content to that arclog destination. So at this moment of time, I don't have the standby server yet ready. So I have to make sure I set the parameter to defer for now. Okay, dash underscore state to set to enable. So I need to make sure I defer this parameter for now. Okay, such that the primary will not be trying to send the read log files. Okay, after that I have to create a listener on the standby server and it has to support dev.dr service. Okay,
Okay.
but I have to check whether there is any listener already configured on the test server or not. So let me go ahead and check. Oracle home, network admin. I have to listener.tora file here. Okay, I have one listener which is already created and it is running on the port 1521 and host is set to test.4techbeast.com. Okay, let me check the IP address of, okay, that is good actually. Yeah, okay, no problem. The listener is already created, but the thing is like it should support the service dev.dr and this dev.dr, it should support the dev.dr service in such a way that irrespective of the database status, whether the database is up or not, whether the instance is started or not, it should support that service. So what
Yeah.
should be done or what modification should be done to the listen.tora file in order to incorporate that change? I told you with active database cloning, if you remember. Irrespective of the database status, if you want to have the listener supporting that service, we have to add a static entry for the listener. And that static entry will be of the form sid underscore list underscore listener name. Here my listener name is listener, so I have to go for listener. Much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
మీరు చెప్తుంటే గుర్తుకొస్తుంది.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, చేసాను యాక్చువల్గా.
Yeah. So the static listener will be of the form sid underscore list underscore listener, and then you have to specify the sid list here. In the sid description clause, you'll be specifying the global database name and the sid name. So I can make it as dev.dr because my database name is dev.dr, so I'll make it as dev.dr. So the moment I add the static entry, the moment I start the listener, it will also support the service called as dev.dr. One second.
Oracle home correct అండి అది 11 DBL.
ఒక్క నిమిషం. ఇది యాక్చువల్గా ఏసీఎం సెట్ అయింది, ఈ సర్వర్లో ఏసీఎం ఉంది.
సో
ఓకే, ఇప్పుడు ఏసీఎం డౌన్ చేశాను. సో ఐఎమ్ జస్ట్ కాన్సన్ట్రేటింగ్ ఆన్ RDBMS home. I have a listener.ref file here also. Okay, the listener name is listener_db. So let us go ahead and add the static entry into this listener file. ఇందాక ఏసీఎం హోమ్కి వెళ్ళాను నేను.
yeah.
And the DB home is DB/DB. Okay, yeah, everything looks good. Let us go ahead and start the listener. Yeah, even the static entry we have to go for listener name, SID list_listener. So I have to make it to listener_db. So it will start listener_db. Okay, see, the moment I start the listener, it is supporting the service devdr, and the status will be in unknown state. Yeah, it's good now. And we have to create a dummy parameter file here. And the two must parameters are DB block size, which is 8192, and DB_name devdr. I'll go ahead and start this auxiliary instance. Startup no more. Okay, it is set to test. So let me set the Oracle SID to devdr. Oh, okay. Okay, the instance is started, and after that we have to create the necessary directory structures. So what are the necessary directory structures we have to create? We have to get the location of data files and read log files on the primary database. It is similar to the cloning part.
So, okay.
To select file_name from DBA data files. Okay, all my data files are present under /database/dev. So on the devdr, I want to make it as /database/devdr. So let me create devdr folder on the test under /database.
Okay.
But let me make sure whether I have the /database or not. Yeah, I do have /database on test. Okay, mkdir devdr. and also I can remove this test because we converted this local file system to ASM
Okay.
just to have sufficient space. Okay, yeah. And within the dev DR, all my data files are present, so I'm good. And I have to go for the redo log file locations. So select member from $log file. Okay. All the members are present under slash database. Okay. All of them are present under slash database. So I'm good actually. Even my slash database there for the redo log group 3, I have the slash database already existing. So I'll be good for the redo log files. Let us check for control files. Okay, I have multiplexed among slash database and slash oracle. So let me go ahead and create a dev.dr folder and slash oracle. So in test and a slash oracle dev.dr. Okay, done. Now what about the diagnostic destinations, the dump file destinations?
Dump file destinations. Yeah.
Show parameter dump. So basically it is oracle app, oracle dag, rdbms, dev and trace. Now if I go into my test database, if I log into my Absor instance, and if I do show parameter dump, it is set to oracle app, oracle dag, rdbms, dev.dr followed by dev.dr and trace. So I have to create dev.dr folder in under dag rdbms. Let us check whether that folder is existing or not. So starting from 11G, the default location is oracle app, oracle dag, rdbms followed by database name and instance name.
Okay.
In 10G, it's it is like oracle home dbs location. The default home location was oracle home dbs. Okay. Okay, the folder is already present, so we are good here. Anything else we have to do?
Adam restrictions.
Yeah. So show parameter audit. Audit is also pointing to oracle app, oracle admin, dev and adm. So probably we are good there also. Let us check. Show parameter audit. Okay, this is pointing to oracle home, rdbms, oracle home, rdbms and audit. So we'll see whether we have the audit folder in this location or not.
Okay.
If you want, you can change it. If you want, you can change that to oracle base, similar to the primary. Okay, I do have audit folder here, so I'm good. And apart from that, I also need to create some more directories. If you remember, under oracle base, I have to create adum, bdump and cdump. Gurtunda?
Yeah.
Under oracle base, oracle app, oracle admin. Here I have to create a folder for dev.dr, because initially whenever it is performing the cloning, it will make use of these locations in order to create the trace files. Once a database is created or once a cloning is done and once the database is up and running, it will make use of the original locations. But initially it will go for oracle app, oracle admin.
Okay.
So let us go ahead and create the directory. and within the dev dr we have to have a dump, b dump, c dump. Okay,
ఓకే
అంతేగా.
సేవ్ చేయాలండి
b dump చేయలేదా మనం?
చేయలేదు.
సరే, షూర్ అండి.
ఇంతకుముందు క్లోనింగ్ చేసినప్పుడు చేయలేదు. అంటే మనం ఆ ఫోల్డర్ పాత్ క్రియేట్ చేసాం కానీ సపరేట్ ఏం క్రియేట్ చేయలేదు.
ఓకే ఓకే,
ఇలా కింద క్రియేట్ చేస్తారు కదా డబ్ల్యూఆర్.
అదే అర్థమైంది. కానీ యూజువల్గా ఏంటంటే క్లోనింగ్ అవుతున్నప్పుడు ఈ ఫైల్స్ కూడా యూస్ చేస్తే అప్పుడప్పుడు ఎర్రర్ వస్తుంటుంది. సో ఇట్స్ బెటర్ టు క్రియేట్ దిస్ ఆల్సో, ఏ డంప్, బి డంప్ అండ్ ట్రీ ఫైల్. B dump. Okay. After that, we need to make sure the password file is existing on the primary. Or a pwdev is existing. So let us copy the same password file onto the standby. Let us check the IP address. (128) Oracle Home DBS. Okay, the password file has been copied, but we have to rename that to, we have to rename Oracle Aura pwdev to Aura pwdevdr. Okay, done. After that, we have to start the listener on the primary, because we need to connect to the primary as well as to the auxiliary instance. So let us go ahead and start the listener on the primary.
టిఎన్ఎస్ టిఎన్ఎస్ నేమ్స్
Yeah, అది యాడ్ చేస్తాను. ఫస్ట్ లిజనర్ క్రియేట్ చేశాక టీఎన్ఎస్ నేమ్స్ యాడ్ చేస్తాను.
ఓకే.
Okay. 1.81/ifconfig. It's 1.84. So let me open that file. '84 port 1521. Yeah. CTL. Okay. Let us check what is set up for local listener parameter. Is something set up for it or not? Okay, local underscore listener is pointing to 81. I have to make that point to 84. So let yeah. Okay, done. Let us check the status of the listener. Okay, it is supporting the dev service now, so we are good. and we need to add the TNS entries. Okay, let me make it as devdr. $128. Because using these TNS names only, it will shift the redo log file from primary to standby. So I'm using the same connection string name devdr and 128. The port on which the listener
service
was
member.
listener port తెలియదు.
Yes.
Okay, it is running on port 1521. So port 1521 devdr. Okay, TNS ping devdr. Okay, it's good. And also we need to add the dev corresponding TNS entry of the dev server on the test. Okay, let me make it to dev. '84. Port is 1522. Service name is dev. TNS ping dev. 84 or 80?
84 but port 21 అని బోల్తాను.
Oh, ఇక్కడ కూడా port 21 ఏనా? Yeah. Okay, it's good now. Everything is good. We have to perform the cloning now. So I'll copy the run block, which we did for the auxiliary. I mean, like which we did. It is similar
So,
to the cloning which we did.
yeah.
So run duplicate target database. There we haven't used the first standby clause. We just used duplicate target database to the database name from active database. Here we have to go for first standby. The reason is we are cloning this database for the standby database. So while cloning, it has to make sure that it will create a standby control file instead of current control file. So this keyword will be used such that Oracle will create a standby control file instead of current control file. Yeah, and here the no file name check is like such that to bypass the Oracle file name check. And then in the SP file clause, we have to specify the parameters which we want to change on the standby server. So when we are setting the parameters on the standby server, first thing is parameter value convert. We have to set this parameter value convert such that wherever there is dev, it has to convert into the devdr. If you take the adump bdump locations, it is present under dag rdbms dev followed by dev on the primary, but whereas on the standby it is devdr followed by devdr. So we have to add this parameter such a way that while performing the cloning, it will convert dev to devdr, and this is valid only for the dump file of I mean like the trace file locations and the dump file locations. And after that, the DB unique name will be devdr here, as a database name is devdr, and then log archive test1 location. I have to go for /backup.
Backup, yeah.
I'll go for devdr. So under slash backup, let me create devdr folder. Okay. And it should be valid for all log files and all roles. Similar way, the same thing, desh2 also. Service should be dev. Now, this will be used, log archive desh2 will be used whenever we convert the standby to primary, such that it has to send the arclog files from the new primary to the new standby.
Okay.
ఏంటంటే ఇప్పుడు dev primary, devdr standby. If we make devdr as primary and dev as standby, in that case, log archive desh2, which is set on the standby, this one, will be served to ship the redo log files from devdr to dev. So that is the reason why I'm going for service is equal to dev, and rest of the parameters will be same.
Okay.
Yeah. Here I have to I also have to set db file name convert and log file name convert as it has to convert from dev to devdr. And local listener, I have to go for 128 because the local listener which is running on the test server is on the host 128 and the port is 1521. That is good. Primary lo nemo 1.84 అని ఉంది కదా. But after the cloning on the standby, it should set to 128. Otherwise, it will not support the service. So that is the reason why we also need to set this parameter. And then file server here will become dev and file client will become devdr because we are using the service as dev.
Okay.
And standby file management auto. It's already set. There is no need to set this parameter. Yeah. So we have to run this block. First, let us connect.
File server client ఒకసారి.
Yeah, quite opposite లో ఉంటాయి కదండి.
Yeah.
Yeah, సర్వర్ వచ్చేసి dev, క్లయింట్ వచ్చేసి devdr.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Arman target /oracle @dev
Auxiliary.
/oracle @devdr. So here also I'm using devdr. So that means I also need to have the DNS entry for devdr on the test side.
Okay.
Whenever we are using active cloning, we need to connect to the target as well as auxiliary instance with the connection string name. We cannot just do auxiliary slash. నేను ఇలా కూడా కనెక్ట్ అవ్వచ్చు,
Yeah,
auxiliary slash అని. కానీ యాక్టివ్ డేటాబేస్ క్లోనింగ్ యూజ్ చేసినప్పుడు you cannot give slash. You have to go for connection string name because while active cloning it will actually bring down the database and it will bring it up again. So if you are using the connection string, the connection will be lost. So you have to go for the connection string name. devdr 128 కదా.
Yeah, 120.
Yep. Okay. Let me run the run block. ఈ రన్ బ్లాక్ లో ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయండి? ఏ పారామీటర్?
Yeah.
dev dr correct command. Okay, let me write on one by one.
లాస్ట్ టైం రన్ చేసినప్పుడు అది డీబీ నేమ్ వచ్చేసి క్యాపిటల్ డెవ్ ఉంది, అక్కడ ఒక ఎర్రర్ వచ్చింది లాస్ట్ టైం.
కేస్ సెన్సిటివ్ తో ప్రాబ్లం ఉండదండి. యాక్చువల్ కాపీ పేస్ట్ లోనే ఎక్కడో ప్రాబ్లం అవుతుంది. ఇలా ఎందుకు టైప్ చేసిన అంటే కరెక్ట్ గా ఏ లైన్ లో ఎర్రర్ వస్తుందో నాకు తెలిసిపోతుంది. ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ ఈ లైన్ లో ఎర్రర్ ఉంటే నాకు ఎంటర్ కొట్టగానే ఎర్రర్ అవుట్ అవుతుంది ఇక్కడ.
ఓకే.
యా, ఇక్కడే అండి ఎర్రర్. ఇది క్లోజింగ్ సింగిల్ కోట్ ఇచ్చాను ఇక్కడ. ఓకే, సింగిల్ కోట్ లాస్ట్ లో క్లోజ్ అవ్వాలి.
కంప్లీట్ కాపీ కాలేదు.
ఓకే,
క్లోజింగ్ బ్రేస్ కాపీ కాలేదు.
యా, టైప్ చేశాను, అది స్లోగా అయిపోతుంది. ఓకే, మీరు ఏఎస్ఎం మీద ట్రై చేయండి. యాక్చువల్ నాకు ఇంకో సర్వర్ లో ఏఎస్ఎం లేదు, అందుకే నేను అది తీసుకోలేదు.
రెండు సర్వర్స్ మీద ఏఎస్ఎం ఉన్నది కానీ అంటే
అంతే. యాక్చువల్ గా మీరు మరీ చేయాలంటే ఏఎస్ఎం టు నాన్ ఏఎస్ఎం కూడా చేయొచ్చు, కొంచెం ప్రాబ్లం అవుతుంది.
ఓకే.
మీకు నేను యాక్టివ్ డేటాబేస్ క్లోనింగ్ కాకుండా మామూలు క్లోనింగ్ కూడా చెప్పాను కదండి.
మామూలు క్లోనింగ్ చెప్పారండి, యాక్టివ్ డేటాబేస్ క్లోనింగ్ కాలేదు అనుకుంటా. అట్లయితే యాక్చువల్ గా ఇప్పుడు డౌట్ వచ్చింది నాకు ఏంటంటే, టార్గెట్ స్లాష్ అని ఒకటే ఇస్తాం మనం, అప్పుడు ఈ పారామీటర్స్ ఏమి ఇవ్వలేదు. లైక్
అయితే నేను చూపించలేదా మీకు యాక్టివ్ డేటాబేస్ క్లోనింగ్?
లేదు.
ఓకే, చెప్పా అనుకుంటా, అంటే వితౌట్ కాపింగ్ ద ఫైల్స్ ఆల్సో వీ కెన్ డూప్లికేట్ అని. యాక్చువల్ గా మనం చెప్పింది, నేను ఫస్ట్ లో చెప్పింది ఏంటంటే, వీ హావ్ టు టేక్ ద బ్యాకప్ ఆన్ ద సోర్స్ సర్వర్, వీ హావ్ టు కాపీ ద ఫైల్స్ ఆన్ టు ద టార్గెట్, అండ్ యూజింగ్ దోస్ బ్యాకప్స్ విల్ పర్ఫార్మ్ ద క్లోనింగ్. Another way is without taking the backup, we can just directly copy the files from primary to standby using this approach.
Okay.
And this approach is available from 11G.
చెప్పారు, కాకపోతే ప్రాక్టీస్ చేసింది మాత్రం అది యాక్టివ్ ప్రాక్టీస్ చేయలేదు.
సేమ్ ఇదే అండి, ఇలా చేయొచ్చు యాక్టివ్ డేటాబేస్ లో.
ఓకే,
జస్ట్ ఫ్రమ్ యాక్టివ్ డేటాబేస్ అని ఇస్తే సరిపోతుంది అంతా. అండ్ ఈ ఫీచర్ 11G లో ఉంది. అండ్ రికవరీ ప్రాసెస్ ఎప్పుడు చేయొచ్చండి? డేటాబేస్ మౌంట్ లో ఉన్నప్పుడా, ఓపెన్ లో ఉన్నప్పుడా?
మౌంట్ లో ఉన్నప్పుడు చేయాలి.
యా, సో స్టాండర్డ్ డేటాబేస్ కూడా ఎప్పుడు మౌంట్ లోనే ఉంటుంది.
యా
11G లో కొత్త ఫీచర్ వచ్చింది ఏంటంటే ఓపెన్ మోడ్ లో ఉంటుంది, బట్ ఇట్ విల్ బి ఇన్ రీడ్ ఓన్లీ మోడ్. ఇన్ ద
చదివాను.
బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ రికవరీ ప్రాసెస్ స్టార్ట్ అవుతుంది. లేదు, మీకు ఇచ్చిన పీడిఎఫ్ లో ఏముంటుందంటే రీడ్ ఓన్లీ లో ఓపెన్ చేయొచ్చు అని ఉంటుంది. ఆ రీడ్ ఓన్లీ లో ఓపెన్ చేసినప్పుడు ఎంఆర్పి ప్రాసెస్ యాక్టివేట్ అయి ఉండదు అని చెప్తుంది. కానీ 11G లో రీడ్ ఓన్లీలో ఉంటుంది, అట్ ద సేమ్ టైం ఎంఆర్పి ప్రాసెస్ యాక్టివేట్ అయి కూడా ఉంటుంది.
ఓకే.
సో యాక్చువల్గా అక్కడ లోడ్ బ్యాలెన్సింగ్ కూడా చేయొచ్చు. అంటే కొంతమంది యూజర్స్ ని ప్రైమరీ కనెక్ట్ చేసేసి కొంతమంది యూజర్స్ ని స్టాండ్ బై కనెక్ట్ చేయొచ్చు. అంటే ఎవరైనా ఓన్లీ సెలెక్ట్ స్టేట్మెంట్స్ రన్ చేస్తారు అనుకోండి, ఏదైనా అప్లికేషన్ ఇఫ్ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద ఇంటర్ఫేస్, పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద ఏపీఐ ఈజ్ ఓన్లీ సెలెక్ట్ రిపోర్టింగ్ పర్పస్. అండ్ ఇంకొకటి డేటాబేస్ బ్యాకప్స్ కూడా ప్రైమరీలో కాకుండా స్టాండ్ బైలో షెడ్యూల్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. సో ప్రైమరీ మీద లోడ్ తగ్గిస్తున్నట్టు ఇంకా.
ఓకే.
ప్రాబ్లీ ఒక 5-10 మినిట్స్ తీసుకుంటుంది.
ఇప్పుడు 11G లో కొత్తగా వచ్చిందన్నారు కదా, అది ఓపెన్ లో ఉండి కూడా మనం
ఇంకొకటి డేటా గార్డ్ లో 2 కీవర్డ్స్ ఉన్నాయండి. ఒకటి స్విచ్ ఓవర్,
స్విచ్ ఓవర్, ఫెయిలోవర్.
ది అదర్ వన్ is failover. Switchover will be a planned event. So if company wants to check whether the data guard is working properly or not, and also if they want to check if something happens on the primary, and if you bring the standby database available to the users, whether the applications will be running in the same way as it is running in the primary. Because application team doesn't know how actually data guard works. So they want to actually test whether if they point all the applications to the standby server, will it work in the same way or not? Will it cause any performance issues or not?
Okay.
So if they want to test all those things, that is called as actually a DR test, disaster recovery test. Or else it also called as DR resiliency test, whether it can withstand if something happens in the primary or not. So disaster recovery or DR resilience test. So whenever we want to test that, we actually perform the switchover. So switchover is nothing but it's a planned event. So we'll plan that event, we'll communicate everything to the users saying that at this moment, on Sunday 10 p.m. we'll perform the switchover. So probably there will be a downtime. So once we perform the switchover, we'll give the new connection string to the end users, and you can start testing on the new primary server. So it will be a planned event where we will switch the primary to standby.
Okay.
And standby to primary. After the test is done, after the DR test is done, we'll again switch back. We'll make the original primary as primary and original standby as standby.
Okay.
Coming to failover, if some DR, during the DR, during the disaster recovery, we will switch the standby to primary. That means if the data center, if the server is in Texas and if something happens in the Texas, in that case we'll not have the primary. So we'll directly switch over the standby to primary. That's it. So failure is an unplanned event. What we can say, it's an unplanned event, and we'll just switch over the standby to primary.
Okay.
Yeah, and after the primary comes up, the original primary comes up, we have to sync it with the original standby, and after that we have to perform the switch back. But the immediate step will be we have to switch over the standby to primary.
Okay.
And in order to activate the MRP process on the standby, we'll be using the command alter database recover managed standby database disconnect. So this will give us the control back, but the MRP process will be running in the background, and it will be applying the redo content whatever it receives from the primary.
Okay.
And the standby database will be in mount mode by default. Okay.
Okay.
Next, if you want to cancel the MRP process, the command will be alter database recover manage standby database cancel. This will cancel the MRP process.
Yeah.
Next, as I showed it to you in this picture, we can also make use of standby redo log files, and without the content being archived in the standby, we can also make use of standby redo log files in order to replay all the transactions. So whenever we want to use the standby redo log files in order to recover or to replay all the transactions on the standby, we will be using real-time apply. Real-time apply is nothing but we'll make use of standby redo log files to replay all the transactions on the standby server. So to enable the real-time apply, we have to have the standby redo log files created. Okay?
Okay. Okay.
We haven't created the standby redo log files yet. మనం ఏమీ create చేయలేదు standby redo log files.
Yeah.
Actually, I forgot. So if you want to have the real-time apply setup, we have to create the standby redo log files on the primary as well as on the standby. After creating the standby redo log files, we have to activate the real-time apply. So to activate the real-time apply, the command will be using current log file disconnect. So this keyword, whenever we use this keyword to activate the MRP process, it will activate the real-time apply. That means it will use the standby redo log files in order to replay all the transactions. So if you want to have the real-time apply, you have to create the standby redo log files. Okay, almost done. Okay. Okay, it was unable to archive the redo log content. We'll see the reason why it was unable to archive the redo log content. It said log to sequence 89 not archived, no available destinations. Okay, so let us check in which database this error actually occurred. Whether it was trying to archive the redo log file on the standby, or whether it is trying to archive the redo log file on the primary. So first let us check the alert log. Okay. So nothing is reported on the primary alert log, on the standby alert log. So let us go ahead and check on the primary alert log. Probably I don't have the slash database here. Let us check. Slash database. cd dev. Okay. Slash backup. cd dev. Archive log. July 7th at 1:06 it created the archive log file. Slash backup used is 61, available is 2.20. Oracle app Oracle. I got the BMS dev. Okay, probably this one. The last timestamp is 239, so probably it would add the bird here. Yeah, archive process free from errors no longer stopped. Disk group backup does not exist. Why did it went for disk group backup? Oh, okay. నేను అది కాపీ పేస్ట్ చేసినప్పుడు అది స్లాష్ బ్యాకప్ కుంది లాగ్ ఆర్కైవ్ డెస్ట్ వన్ ప్లస్ బ్యాకప్ కుంది which was using ASM. I copied it from Word document and it was pointing to plus backup, which is the ASM location. So log underscore archive underscore dest underscore one. Yeah, dest underscore one is set to plus backup. So I have to change that to slash database slash dev. Alter system set log archive dest underscore one equal to location equal to. As I said to plus backup, it was searching for plus backup, which is not existing. I'll go for slash backup slash dev and then while underscore file equal to all underscore log files all underscore roles db unique name equal to dev. Okay, now it is done. Let us see by okay, now we enable the archive log definition. Let us try to archive the current redo log file, whether it will error out or whether it will create the redo log file. Alter system archive log current. So when you are doing, you may not see this error. Okay, I was able to archive the redo log content. Now cd slash backup slash dev. Okay, I do have three redo log files which are archived: 89, 90, and 91. Okay, 89, 90, and 91. Now I have the standby database where all the data files are copied, where all the redo log files are created probably. So let us exit from rman. Let us see how much cloning has been done. SQL plus slash assist DBA. Okay, select status from $v instance. It's mounted. Describe $v database. Here I have the current underscore SCN. I also have checkpoint underscore change number. So let us get the checkpoint underscore change number which is registered in vdal data file. Okay, here the checkpoint change number is 3622905. So let us convert this SA number into timestamp. Select SCN to timestamp. 3622905 from Joel. గుర్తుందా అండి ఫంక్షన్ SN2 టైమ్స్ టైమ్ కదా. Select object underscore name from DB underscore objects where object underscore name like, probably this will not work here. Okay. Percentile SCN percentile. SCN underscore 2 underscore timestamp. It's correct. Okay. Probably this is not working because the database is in mount mode. So let us execute the same command in the primary database. Then we'll get the timestamp corresponding to this one. So undev paste. Yeah. So this corresponding to 7 July 133:14. Let us check the checkpoint change number which is present in primary database. Which is 3628412. Two eight four one two from 12. We can say this is 239. So that means my data file requires a redo content from 133 to 239. Am I correct or not? On the standby server. So that means that whatever the changes which are happened from 133 to 249, all those things are present in the sequence number 89, 90 and 91. So we do require those arclog files. So how we will get those arclog files? First, we have to enable the MRP process on the standby server. Okay. To enable the MRP process on the standby, as I said, the command is alter database, recover, managed standby database, disconnect. This will activate the MRP process. Okay. And at the same moment, check the last entries in the alert log file, what it says. ఇక్కడ ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉంటే చెప్పండి నాకు. So when I'm issuing alter database, recover, manage standby database, disconnect, it is starting the MRP process here, and it also said, okay, see here, it cannot be archived /database /dev dr, no such file or directory, /database /dev dr. Okay, exit from here. cd /database dev dr. The folder is present. Sorry, it is looking under yeah. Okay, it actually copied the data files, but it did not copy the redo log files. Okay, క్లోనింగ్ అవుతున్నప్పుడు డేటా ఫైల్స్ కాపీ చేసింది, redo log ఫైల్స్ కాపీ చేయలేదు. redo log ఫైల్స్ కాపీ చేసే ముందు arclog జనరేట్ అయింది అనమాట. arclog జనరేట్ అయిన తర్వాత అది అప్లై చేసిన తర్వాత redo log ఫైల్స్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తుంది. కానీ ఇక్కడ redo log ఫైల్స్ క్రియేట్ అవ్వలేదు. ఓకే, so if you look at this destination location /database /dev dr, I just have the data files. I don't have the redo log files which are created. Okay, the redo log files are missing here. The online redo log files which are created on the primary are not created on the standby yet. Okay, so to get them created, any guess what we have to do? Alter database, శివ గారు గుర్తుందా ఏం చేయాలో? మీకు రీడ్-లాక్ ఫైల్ మేనేజ్మెంట్ అప్పుడు చెప్పాను, ఏదైనా ఒక రీడ్-లాక్ ఫైల్ కనుక కరప్ట్ అయింది అనుకోండి, సో if we have to recreate that read-lock file, we'll be using alter database clear lock file. ఆ clear lock file recreate చేస్తుంది మళ్ళీ. So the same thing we have to do it here. Alter database clear lock file group 1. Okay. So first MRP ప్రాసెస్ స్టాప్ చేశాక చేయాలన్నమాట. వినిపిస్తుందా? Are you able to hear me? Okay. Okay. So here we have to clear the log file group 1 to recreate the read log groups. సో క్లోనింగ్ అవుతున్నప్పుడు రీడ్ లాక్ ఫైల్స్ క్రియేట్ చేయలేదు, డేటా ఫైల్స్ మాత్రమే కాపీ చేసింది. రీడ్ లాక్ ఫైల్స్ క్రియేట్ చేసే ముందు అది ఆర్కైవ్ అది రీడో అంతా అప్లై చేసిన తర్వాత రీడ్ లాక్ ఫైల్స్ క్రియేట్ చేద్దాం అనుకున్నాం. సో యాజ్ రీడ్ లాక్ ఫైల్స్ ఆర్ నాట్ క్రియేటెడ్, యూ హ్యావ్ టు క్రియేట్ దెమ్ మాన్యువల్లీ. టు క్రియేట్ దెమ్ మాన్యువల్లీ విల్ బి యూజింగ్ దిస్ కమాండ్. Whenever we go for alter database clear log file group 1, it will check the read log file location in the control file and it will recreate them under /database/fdr. So let us go ahead and issue these commands. But to issue these commands, we have to stop the recovery process. So let us stop the recovery process using alter database recover managed standby database cancel. Okay. Looks like it's unable to stop the MRP process. Let us do one thing. Shutterbot. Okay. Startup mount. యాక్చువల్గా అయితే మళ్ళీ నేను ఆ రన్ బ్లాక్ మళ్ళీ రన్ చేయాలి, టైం పడుతుందని చెప్పేసి నేను అక్కడి నుంచి కంటిన్యూ చేస్తున్నాను. ఎక్కడైతే ఆగిపోయిందో అక్కడి నుంచి కంటిన్యూ చేస్తున్నాను.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Database. Okay. Let us check. Select group member from $log file. Okay. There is no group 1, group 2, group 3 and group 4 are existing. Even on the primary, group 2, 3 and 4 are existing.
Yeah.
Clear log file group 2. Yeah, this will create those files. Okay. In a similar way for group 3, and group 4. Okay. Now we have all the redo log files created. If you want to check them out, /database /dev.dr, we can see the redo log files now. Yeah, redo 02, redo 04, and redo 03 was created under /database.
Yeah.
Now start the recovery process. Alter database recover. But before doing that, let us check the control file type. Select in VDL database view. There is a column called as control file underscore type, which will show you whether it's a current control file or a standby control file. This is a column which will show us. So select control file underscore type from $, database. Okay, it's a standby control file. So we are good with the control file. So we can go ahead and start the recovery process. Alter database, recover, managed, standby database, disconnect. We'll see what will happen now. In the meanwhile, let me open the trace file. Okay, looks like it should be good now.
Yeah.
Yeah, this will wait to apply the log sequence numbers 89, 90 and 91, but we don't have those log sequence on the standby server because those are not shipped from the primary to standby. The reason for that is we have disabled the log archive dest state 2, if you remember, which will not send the archlog files from primary to standby.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
It is deferred, so we have to make it enable. Okay, now it is enabled. We'll see what happens. Let me generate one more archlog here. Okay, yeah, it actually picked up the sequences now. The moment I enable the log archive dash 2, it picked up those sequences 89, 90 and 91. It is trying to apply it now. Yep. Yeah, it's done. Now let us check the checkpoint underscore change number from VDOL data file. Probably we'll have the same checkpoint change number now. Yeah, we have 9486, which we saw on the primary. Okay, it's actually advanced. One more archlog is also generated, right? I mean, like one more archlog is also generated. As a result, even here the checkpoint change number will be same. Select checkpoint underscore change number from $, data file 8713. Probably it's keep on changing, but we are good now. So the only thing what we have to check now is archive log list. This will show us the current log sequence. The current log sequence is 93. Okay. Let us generate one more archlog file using the command alter system archive log current. Okay. Let me generate two more. Now if I do archive log list, you can see the current log sequence is 96. We should have the same current log sequence as 96 on the standby also. That means those archlog files are being uploaded on the standby also. Yeah, the current log sequence is 96, so we are good. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you want to enable the real-time apply, we have to create the standby redo log files. To create the standby redo log files, it will be number of online redo log files plus 1, or number of online redo log groups plus 1. So if I have 3 redo log groups, I have to create 4 standby redo log groups.
So,
So to create the 4 standby redo log files or groups, the command will be alter database add standby. Just we need to add keyword, standby keyword here. Standby log file group 5, and the members will be slash database slash redo 5 underscore 01 dot log. And we need to make sure the redo log group size is same as our online redo log group size. Let us check the online redo log group size. One, two, 3 KB. 1, 2, 3. It's 100 MB. So let me create with 100 MB size. Just we need to add standby keyword here. So in the real time, we have to create the standby redo log files before performing the cloning itself.
okay.
Actually, I forgot. Okay. C slash 5 slash 6 5 slash 6. Okay. Oh. ఇంకొక గ్రూప్ చేయొచ్చు, మొత్తం 4 గ్రూప్స్ క్రియేట్ చేయాలి. సో ఇంకొకటి క్రియేట్ చేయాల్సి వస్తుంది. Let us check whether the standby redo log files created on the standby or not. I guess it will not be created. Let us check. Select member from $log file. Yeah, they are not created. Select member from $log file. Yeah. Here we do have those groups 5, 6, 7 and 8. 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5, 6, 7 and 8. We don't have them yet on the standby. So we also need to create them on the standby. So we'll be using the same command. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, I need to cancel the recovery process. But before doing that, let us generate one RK log and we'll see whether the redo log files will be created after generating the RK log. As far as I know, it will not create. Just alter database, archive log current.
Okay.
Alter system. It's 97. 97. Select member from $log file. Yeah, they're not created. So we need to cancel the recovery process and we need to add them up. Alter database recover, managed, standby database, cancel. Okay. So it should actually, the control should come back immediately. In the previous case, it was not coming back. So that is the reason why I should shut about.
Okay.
Okay. లంచ్ చేశారా మీరు?
లేదండి.
అయ్యా,
పర్లేదు పర్లేదు.
ఇక్కడ ఆపేస్తానులేండి ఇంకా.
పర్లేదు. ఇట్స్ ఓకే. పాటలు కూడా మీది అయిపోయిందా?
లేదు. ఓ, నేను 5 క్రియేట్ చేయలేదు, 5 ఒకటి క్రియేట్ చేయాలి.
5.
Now we can enable the recovery process. Alter database recover, managed, standby database. We can go for using current log file, which will enable the real-time apply. Yep. Yeah. Waiting for non-current online video log files. Yeah, it's good now. So we were able to enable the real-time apply. Now, if you want to see the data guard mode, describe $, database. Here, you'll have a mode called as protection underscore mode. This will show you whether the data guard is in maximum performance, maximum protection, or maximum availability. This is in maximum performance mode. And if you look at our parameters, actually, we went for log writer sync. So we can actually enable the maximum protection, or we can also enable maximum availability. So if you want to change the mode from one mode to another mode, the command will be alter database, maximize, availability. I guess ఇదే కమాండ్ చూద్దాం. Alter database, maximize availability. Maximize spelling తప్ప. 1 second, let me check it. Alter database name. చాలా స్లో అయిపోయింది. Yeah. Yeah. Alter database, set standby database to maximize availability.
Database.
Yeah. So by using this command, we can change data guard mode from one mode to another mode. But you need to make sure whether you are using the correct process, log writer sync or not.
Okay.
కంటిన్యూ చేయమంటారా ఆపేయమంటారా? కంటిన్యూ చేయమంటే స్విచ్ ఫెయిల్ఓవర్ చూపిస్తాను, లేదు అంటే తర్వాత చూద్దాం.
మీకు ఓకేనా?
యా నాకు ఓకే అండి. ఓకే అండి, అయితే నేను మళ్ళీ కంటిన్యూ చేస్తాను. సంతోష్ నీకు కూడా చెప్తాను తర్వాత మళ్ళీ క్లాస్ ఎప్పుడు ఉంటుందో. యా ఓకే దెన్ బాయ్. బాయ్ సంతోష్, గుడ్ నైట్.
Bye.